Maybe things thousands of miles away from here.
Welcome, Fit Traveler. Thanks for listening in today as we dive into another fun topic where Marissa and Mike aim to deliver life-giving insights and encourage you to live a healthier, more adventurous lifestyle. Let's get into the show.
And welcome back, everyone.
Hello, we're here.
We are Mike and Marissa. We're the two Fit Travelers.
That we are. This is our 11th episode.
But it is our 11th episode.
We've almost been doing this for a whole year now.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Look at us go.
What have you learned so far?
I've learned that I basically can say nothing and you would just run the whole podcast because you like to talk. No, I've learned that it's definitely not as scary or overwhelming as I thought it would be. It's kind of fun to just sit here and talk to all of our listeners and to get some feedback. It's been a really cool experience.
Yeah, it's unusual, hearing yourself talk for the first time and trying to, you want to say something important and valuable, but you're just not sure what's going to come out because there's so much going on. But after it becomes kind of natural and you're used to having a microphone or a camera in front of you, then it's normal.
Then it's better.
No, well, speaking of, this is our first video podcast episode. We do have the camera in the background, and guys, bear with us. This is a grassroots effort. Neither of us come from a media background, so we're learning all of this as we go. So give us some props if the video quality and audio is good. If it's not, then just send us a funny emoji or something like that.
And we'll work on it for next time.
We'll work on it for next
Bear
time.
with us.
It's a work in progress. It's a development. Got to start somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
How does our platform work? You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so if you're just joining us, like Mike said, we are the Two Fit Travelers. We have a couple of different platforms that all are working together to provide the best value in fitness and travel for you. So the main one is going to be our Instagram, and that's where we're going to be posting a lot of our photos and video.
Frequent.
Yeah, most frequent, yeah. I would say. Photos, video content. On our stories, we're going to be posting a lot of fitness and travel tips and kind of just our daily life stuff. Every Monday on our website and our blog, we have a new blog that kind of talks about our monthly topic. This month's topic is going to be debunking some of the media myths, and that's what we're going to cover in this podcast as well today. And then our last one is kind of our podcast, and our podcast is once a month. We're going to go through something that either we've had a lot of questions about or we just feel like is a really cool topic to cover. And our new one that we're starting and that's coming out soon is going to be our email newsletter, which is going to air every single month. It's going to be kind of a compilation of all of the information that we put out that month. So if you want a little brief synopsis of what we covered that month because you don't have time to really dig into all of our content, that's where you want to go. We're also going to be having giveaways in there as well as some other cool stuff. So definitely want to be signed up for that. It's going to be cool.
We really joke with ourselves after any time we record this. We could stop and edit and record the perfect version, but we usually just go with the raw, unedited version, and we give ourselves a hard time about the different new English words that we create as we go.
There's a lot of bloopers. But
anyway, we're working on adding the most value to you guys to help you live a healthier, more adventurous lifestyle. Ultimately live out your best adventure. Mm-hmm. And we're trying to push that type of content and add value to you guys on any platform that is convenient to you. So you can now join our newsletter. You can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube, or all of them, and gain access not only to the content that we're pushing out, but also we're creating partnerships as we go to add value to you guys, mainly cost savings and different benefits and things like that.
Yep, and we are the Two Fit Travelers on every single platform. So
how can they support us if they want to support the show?
So cool thing that you can do is check out our resources page on our website where we share all of the tools that we use to book amazing adventures, and then our favorite equipment to help us stay fit and healthy on the go. Any of those times that you use the links that are featured on that page, we do take a small commission from that, and it's something that you can do to support us.
Yeah, the affiliate links are super great. It's an opportunity for us to share something that we actually use, and you don't have to pay anything extra for it. It's something that if you are going to get it anyway, you could buy it through us or through our link, and that would help support the show.
Absolutely. So the other thing that we wanted to mention is we are still currently looking for people to trial our Fit Travel services. If you are interested, go to our website and click on our Book Your Fit Travel Adventure. Fill out the form and we would design a trip for you, start to finish. We would give you the plan completely for free based on what you're looking for. It's a really cool feature that we're just looking to give back and kind of fine tune our plan. So if you're interested, check that out.
Yeah, we had a ton of people in the initial run express interest, and we were able to create some really fun trips, and we're still working on a couple of those, but we are looking for about 10 more that we'd like to trial and figure out, some kinks on our end, some formats and templating, and it's just fun for us. It's really fun.
Yeah, it's kind of a cool thing. And then other things that are upcoming, we do want to talk about our fitness retreats that are starting in 2020, just to keep throwing that out there. We really love the community that we're starting to build here, and we want to get together with all of you guys and just kind of go through our typical workouts, some nutrition info, some really cool stuff, and just kind of have a fit adventure and kind of give you a taste of what we would plan for you if we were planning something personal for you, but in a group setting that we lead, and it's going to be a really cool experience. So stay tuned for that. Yeah, and then last but not least, we are starting today, actually, our podcast interviews. And so if you listen all the way through to the end of this episode, we are going to have actually Mike's sister, Megan, who is going to be featured on this episode, and she's going to talk about some really cool stuff.
Yeah, so it was easy to reach out to my sister because she's close and we communicate on a regular basis, but also I actually give her a lot of credit for giving me the travel bug, because when I was in high school, she was finishing high school, she actually studied abroad, and I believe the total is in the 30s of number of countries that she visited while she was abroad, while she was traveling and studying, but she did study abroad, so she has a lot of experience traveling in between different countries. She knows Europe very well. She also knows Central and South America. And she currently lives abroad. She currently lives in Mexico and has lived there for over a decade and has a family there now. And so she has a wealth of experience, probably more than Marissa and I, about traveling, and but more importantly, living abroad. So we wanted to bring that dynamic to the podcast, because when we travel, we try to travel and exist as if we were living there. So we're not just tourists, we're not just stopping through. We really try to immerse ourselves in the different cultures, and Mexico is a place that we've visited a few times, and specifically to visit her, but we've experienced different aspects of Mexico. And it's a place that we've really come to appreciate, and we've learned a lot about Mexico that we didn't know before, that maybe we thought differently, and so she's going to bring that flavor to the podcast. But we're really looking forward to all of the interviews that we have slated and that we're working on.
Absolutely.
Before we get into our topic, we are going to talk about our two tips that we like to leave with every episode. So we like to have a travel tip and a fitness tip with every episode, and Marissa usually heads up the travel tip, and it could be a tip, it could be a fact from the industry, it could be like a current event. And on the fitness side, since that's kind of my background, then we'll talk about maybe something current. We've talked about the keto diet before, we've talked about different aspects, but we have some cool stuff for you today. What's on the travel front?
So with the travel front, we just wanted to talk about how several airlines are starting to add new routes. And so what we did is we found this really cool article that lists a ton of different airlines. It's obviously not a complete list, but it's a list of...
Pretty thorough list.
Yeah, it's a list of a lot of airlines and what routes they're adding. for the end of the year and starting to kind of progress into 2020. So some notable ones that I thought were cool was American Airlines is adding a route to Africa, and so that one's pretty cool. And then our favorite is Southwest is adding a direct to Hawaii. We love Southwest. We fly them a lot, and so we're very excited about that one. But there are tons of things. I mean, from Frontier, Spirit, United, a ton of airlines.
Almost every major airline in the US.
And so if you guys want to check out that article and see where your favorite airline is headed, or maybe check out to see if any of the airlines that you frequently fly are on there, it is going to be in our show notes.
That's right. And I will use that as an opportunity to preface this entire episode before I get into the fitness fitness concept for today. Today's episode is going to be slightly different than other episodes. I feel like we say that every time. If you don't like our podcast this month, come back next month. It'll be really different. But today's episode is going to be a lot of kind of like surface summary information that you guys can grab on your way, on the go. And we're going to include a lot of the detailed information in the show notes because it is going to be an episode that you may want to go back and reference. So all of the information that we talk about, if you don't grab it right away, or is there something that you hear that piques your interest, then just go to the show notes, which will, you can link through the interface on iTunes or Apple Podcasts. That's right. Getting our details down. All of the information that we are sharing today is going to be linked and properly detailed in the show notes. So use that as a resource. Use this as a fun way for us to have a conversation as you're in the car, at the gym, or on the road, or walking, running, you name it. But we hope to add value in a number of ways, and that's one of them. So real quick, on the fitness topic, again, I'm going to link this research article in the show notes, but some of you guys may know I like to geek out once in a while, but in looking for gaps in the fitness and wellness industry, there are still a ton of people that aren't physically active, aren't eating well on a regular enough basis, and the obesity epidemic is still rising. It's still an increasing problem, and that could be because the wellness industry has only just started to talk about it. There are a ton of initiatives that are going into place, but as a fitness professional, we still find the problem to be a growing one, and we're trying to look for different implications. And so I pull out these research articles, number one, because I am always in and around research, but at the same time, I'm always looking for ways to communicate things in a different way, in a different light, so that it clicks with certain people. And so one of the recent articles that I found was talking about this concept of the MET, M-E-T, which is metabolic equivalent, and I don't know all the details about the acronym, but anyway, to me as a fitness professional, metabolic equivalent. And what it means is a multiple of activity or energy expended at rest. So like a MET of 0 or 1 would be basically resting, sitting on the couch or standing. A MET of, say, 5 would be like a jog, like a moderate jog. High intensity exercise usually gets up into the 9s, 10s, or higher. And the article talked about the mortality rate as it relates to METs. And essentially there is a range all the way up to 5,000 METs. The low end was about 150 METs. That range saw a benefit in health, a lowered mortality rate up to 5,000 METs. Now, why am I sharing this with you? Well, if you take the number and the comparison that I just used, say 5 is like a jog, that's like jogging 1,000 times in a week. It was a weekly measurement. So up to 5,000 METs, or say 1,000 times where you go out and jog to exertion, you're benefiting your health up until that point. The interesting part was at the bottom end of the range, and I'm going to link this in the show notes for all the details, showed that underneath that range, your mortality was also, the risk of mortality was also increased. So long story short, it's emphasized the need for physical activity and exercise. And so my point to you today very long answer, winded answer, is that the necessity to exercise and be active is so vitally important to all of us, not just our overall health and improving our quality of life, but also physically being able to move about into
life.
Later
Into
years.
life. Into life.
So I rant for a minute because I want to share some details, but ultimately I hope you hear my heart about the whole issue, which is that you should be active. You should exercise regularly, even if you have to wake up. The reason that Marissa and I work out at the time that we do early in the morning is because we want to be an excuse remover for people. We have a lot on our plate. We choose to do things on a schedule, because when people do ask us about it, we want to be an inspiration to those people. And so whatever you have to do to find an activity, a consistent activity routine, I want you to do it, because your health and your life depends on it.
Off your soapbox.
Off my soapbox.
You did it.
Wow, what even happened right there?
That was awesome. You just went for it.
So let's get into the show. So typically those are supposed to be 30-second clips, but again,
we were passionate about that one today, so it's good.
Progress. So what are we talking about today?
So today we are talking about avoiding marketing mayhem, which is how to stay focused, how to sift through the noise, and how to rely on the right resources to figure out if it's actually what you think it is. Which means we're going to debunk a lot of these really awesome buzzwords that travel and grocery stores use to kind of get you to purchase or to think you're getting something that you might not be. Which sounds all very cryptic, but we're going to go into details.
In our context, it's, travel companies that are trying to get you to book with them and save here, bundle here, this and that. But are you really saving money? It exists in retail stores and other industries as well. Like, get $10,000 back if you sign here on the dotted line tomorrow. And so we want to debunk some of that for you.
Yeah. So we're going to start out with the travel side. So whenever you're looking for a flight, a lot of the times you'll see a sale or a deal for a specific flight. And so basically what that means is that you still have to spend the money to get that deal a lot of the times. So Mike, explain kind of what we're talking about here with that. Yeah,
so if anyone's a fan of The Office, we always use this reference. There's an episode where they have this coupon book as it's like worth $40 or something, but everyone talks about how it's $15,000 worth of savings or something like that. You know the details better than I do. And there's one character in the show that keeps trying to explain to people, you do realize that you have to spend
thousands
of dollars just to get a little bit of savings. And no one seems to care because they get the coupons, they get the savings, they get the deals. And so that is a perfect analogy of what we as a general population tend to do when we see savings. We see, I get to save that much money. Well, if you were going to spend the money in the first place, that's one thing. But if it's something completely outside, if you have to inconvenience yourself at all in order to save that much money, then it's not saving anything. So it really comes down to the actual money that you're going to spend. It's one of the reasons that our assistance with bookings and things like that is important, because we actually shop and compare all of the rates to begin with. One of the ways we actually include this in our travel booking strategy, it just came to mind. One of the ways that we help to combat that whole process of kind of getting looped into savings that aren't really savings is the first step that we teach people is to go to Google Flights about 12 months away from your trip and look at the typical cost of what your trip is and use that as a baseline. And what you'll find is you'll be able to notice the variability and notice when you are getting a good deal. And so you can kind of aggregate all of these different costs. You can see, okay, this is about how much I'm going to save. So if I see any deal that's way underneath that, I'm going to hone in and see what is that deal all about. And so that's one of the biggest things when it comes to savings and deals is, you still have to spend money. So look at the overall cost. It's important to be an educated buyer. So again, and there are many people like us that kind of shop for this stuff all the time and are familiar with the costs. But also, it's a way to kind of prevent yourself from getting looped into the whole savings idea. If there's something that says like sale or savings, that's usually a good opportunity not to go, gravitate toward it and take advantage, but look closer at what you're really saving. Do you have to buy 10 of this item in order to save X amount of dollars? Do you really need 15 frying pans? Like maybe you're a professional chef and you have like 8 people working for you, but chances are probably not. Yeah, I would say statistically, savings and deals probably are not going to work out in your favor. So.
Yeah, a lot of the times I think another good point to mention in regards to flights is when you see a deal, it's usually for a one-way flight. And so you get that one-way flight deal, maybe it's like a $30 one-way flight, and you think, oh my gosh, that's so crazy. But if you weren't planning on taking that trip, then you have to think about, okay, that's my one-way flight, but then, my housing, my food while I'm there, my whatever I'm going to do while I'm there, and then the flight back is all added expenses that you weren't even planning on taking in the first place because you weren't planning on going. So that thinking in that mindset may help you kind of really reframe, okay, this $30 flight is going to cost me, $600 of money that I actually wasn't even planning on spending. So it's just kind of thinking about all of the different steps and parts that are included in something like a sale or a deal.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, and so the other half of this whole equation is when it comes to the marketing mayhem topic. This is going to be the section where you're going to want to refer to the show notes because I'm going to rifle through it pretty quick. But when it comes to different food items and the nutrition content, the nutrition information, nutrition label, these are very misleading in many cases. So we're seeing a trend in the marketplace where there are companies that are surfacing, that are showing up in retail stores, that are making clean products that don't have a ton of ingredients and they're more whole food based. You're still better off shopping in the whole food section, which is the cold section. Bring your jacket and stay to the outside of the store. When you go toward the middle of the store, you're going to deal with stuff that has an incredibly long shelf life. Now, we still eat some of that stuff. We're not saying completely avoid it. But if we're trying to make better nutritional decisions, that's where you want to start. But the marketing around all of these things is very, very misleading. I want to give you a quick concept to focus on. So if you go to the produce section or the let's say just the vegetables section, which is usually the first place that the grocery store has just out to the right, there's no marketing there. It's just green leafy vegetables, herbs, peppers, stuff you'd find in the garden, you name it, whatever store you're at. There's no label that says
these berries are better.
Antibiotic free or gluten free, cucumbers or whatever it is. And there's rhyme and reason there. When you go to the inside of the store, you have colorful labeling and like plastic and boxed shapes, and the colors are all in line. That the whole inside of the store is like a psychological maze, and they're just trying to get you. It's a huge marketing game, and now you see these retail stores with their own products and their own brands because they're trying to compete with the other manufacturers. And so, guys, this is the supermarket, the retail store is not set up for you and I to be healthy. Let me tell you that. First and foremost, it's designed to sell a product. And so, that being said, I'm going to give you a couple ideas to think about with regards to the labels on food. And so when you're looking into what you're buying, simple and easy concept, stick to the outside of the store, stick to whole foods, which whole food is the opposite of processed food. So if it's if it resembles a food item, that's a whole food. If there are 15 ingredients in one serving, it's probably more processed than you know. And so here are some things to pay attention to. Organic. So organic is a word that's thrown around, and it usually just comes with a higher price tag. The term organic can be used in a lot of different ways, but what the USDA regulations are around the use of organic are as follows. If an item says 100% organic, then it is made with 100% organic product, or 100% of that item is organic. without that 100%, the makeup of whatever you're purchasing and consuming is no longer 100% organic. So wrap your mind around that. Unless it says 100% organic, it is not 100% organic. If it says organic, then the regulation requires that only 95% of that item is made of organic substance. And further down the list, if you see the item saying made with organic, fill in the blank, that just means that only 70% of the item is actually organic. And so if you think about that, any item outside of 100% organic means that they can put anything in that food item. They can use any type of preservative or any type of preparation cutting method to make that product last longer. And that's often what they do. It's just, they want you to have an item that's not going to be moldy and, disposed in the store. Some other things outside of the actual makeup of the product. So we can talk about like meats and stuff. Mm-hmm. So first of all, if you see a meat that says gluten-free, just turn the other way. But, Marissa has noticed a couple things with regards to like labeling on meat.
Yeah, so the biggest thing that I always tell people, and it's kind of a soapbox topic for me, is when you see antibiotic-free meat in the store, usually it costs a lot more, and it makes me very furious because as a veterinarian and a person who works with food animals and people who treat food animals, I know that meat that goes to market, any meat, regardless of if it's antibiotic free or not, labeled in the store, has to pass a certain regulation by someone who's evaluating the meat to make sure that there is no trace of antibiotics in that meat. And so any meat that is in the store already has no antibiotics in it. So basically the meat that you're buying in the store, regardless of if it's labeled antibiotic free or not, doesn't have antibiotics in it. The reason that the other products are able to be labeled antibiotic free is because they didn't use antibiotics in the meat ever during their entire life. So what that means to me as a vet is that those animals, when they were sick, didn't receive medicine to treat their sickness. Instead, they were just able to kind of, go through that sick process. And obviously, sick meat is not allowed to be able to be sold. So
it's just kind of a misnomer,
right?
Like misleading.
Yeah. So
it's an opportunity for them to say, hey, here, this product is healthy or it's safe, or now you see a lot of branding that. Like I saw a commercial for nuts the other day, and the nuts were called Diets, Dietz. Like, these nuts, it's like the diet version of nuts.
Yeah, and they're just the same thing. It's all just...
The point here is to help protect you against marketing mayhem. So again, this messaging, this marketing, it's designed to get you to buy something that's not necessarily in your best interest. So let me share a couple other things to you that may be a little bit misleading. Something that is low calorie or reduced calorie generally just means that it has a percentage less than the original version. Well, if the original version is a surplus of unhealthy calories, then whether it's reduced calorie or not doesn't mean it's
healthier.
Good, right? Let's talk about condiments for a second. So often with condiments, you're talking about the fat or the sugar content. And so if an item is sugar-free, that's probably a good thing. But I would pay attention to what artificial sweeteners that product is using. If it's something like aspartame, I'm not going to go into a huge debate about specific ingredients. You guys are welcome to do that research on your own. If it's something like aspartame, I would probably steer away from it. If it's any other sweetener, I would also consider, first of all, why are you taking, evaluate why you're getting the sugar-free version versus just going to a healthier alternative anyway. But also, the use of artificial sweeteners can sometimes be more powerful in terms of cravings and having more of a
addictive property.
Yeah, being even more addicted to the sugar product than before because of the effect on the brain, basically, as compared to sugar and the artificial sweeteners. So the artificial sweeteners can be sweeter than sugar, and that can have negative side effects. But let's talk specifically about the fat content. So there are a few different rankings of fat content. If you just have the normal version, it's not going to say anything about it. But if there's a modified version, let's say reduced fat, or if it's less fat, that simply means that there's 25% less fat per serving than the original. If it's less, that means like a comparison version. So again, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's low fat, although sometimes it does. It just means that it's slightly modified from its original version. If it says low fat, then that means it's less than 3 grams of fat per serving. So that is something that you can use to your benefit. If it says low fat, you automatically know, okay, less than 3 grams of fat per serving. You still need to look at the nutrition facts label and do your math to figure out like how much is one serving so that you stay underneath whatever amount you're looking for. But then fat-free, that just means that there's less than a half gram of fat per serving. So it doesn't mean that it's free of fat, as it implies. It just means that it's a very low amount. I'll use that as a kind of a segue and a way to land the plane. I want to talk about one more thing with regards to the whole like fat-free debate, the reduced content debate, and then we'll talk about gluten-free, things like that. Remember, guys, there's a ton of information in the show notes, so you guys can always go there for all of the details and some context that we haven't talked about here. But when it comes to the fat-free or low-calorie, low-fat, low-sugar, etc., all of those different details, just remember that it's all relative, and the changes are marginal at best, in my opinion. So although they may be a healthier version, and you may have some special considerations that cause you to look for something like low sodium, or you choose low fat options to try and program yourself to consume lower fat options, always look at the nutrition facts label and get familiar with those items that you're buying on a regular basis. What is one serving of this item? How much am I really consuming in terms of protein, carbs, and fat? That's a great place to start your nutritional journey, is just being familiar with what you're eating. I've witnessed this probably thousands of times, where if someone just recognizes what they're really consuming on a regular basis, they can make radical changes overnight. So I want to talk about gluten-free real quick because this is close to my heart. At one point, I thought I was developing a gluten intolerance because many people around me were talking about being intolerant to gluten, and I would always ask the question like, "Oh, so where'd you go to get that diagnosis? Like, do you have like a nutrition doctor, or did you take a test?" And the response would often be, "Oh no, I just know," or "Oh well, I took out bread and I feel great," but I began a low sugar fix, a low sugar diet, if you will, a few weeks ago. And unfortunately, bread, because it's so processed and refined, acts as a sugar in your body. So it's equivalent to consuming sugar. And just removing highly processed carbohydrates from the diet helped to ease some of my digestive discomfort. And so I'm convinced that it's more of a sugar issue than anything, because I consume other foods with gluten in it, and I don't have the same issues. So, on the topic of gluten-free, if you've been diagnosed by a medical professional, then, of course, pay attention to gluten-free. Again, if it's meat, run the other way. It shouldn't have gluten in it, or milk, yeah. If it's something that shouldn't have gluten in it in the first place, then it's probably a good thing that it's gluten-free. But that being said, pay attention to your body, pay attention to different changes. But if you're really concerned about an intolerance or about a digestive issue or any type of health issues, contact a medical professional, someone that can really help you with that. So, in summary on my end, go to the show notes if you have questions or any of this stuff piqued your interest, because there's some really fascinating information when you get into the actual nutrition content of food versus what marketing tells you.
Absolutely. And just kind of on another little topic about that, my dad is actually a food technologist, and he talked to me a lot about how companies actually use different colors in their packaging to get you to purchase their product. And a lot of that is all just so that what is hitting your eye is making you want to buy versus what the actual product is. And so if you can change your thought process to, oh, you know, these crackers have a red label and that is bright and it's attracting me, to let me flip it around and actually read what's in it, you're going to save yourself so many calories and so many unwanted nutritional things just because you're a more educated consumer.
Yeah, I'm going to give everyone a tip. This one's free. What I wear glasses, or I wear corrective eyewear, and what I do when I go to the grocery store now is I leave my glasses at home. So it forces me to pay more attention so that I don't walk into people, and I really have to squint hard. I oftentimes lose myself in aisles because sometimes I can't really see the sign, but that forces me. I have to like get in, you know, really close to read the label. So
that's a good.
I said it was free.
A good tip. Just
pay for
blind yourself so you can't see the labels. It's fine.
Anyway, guys, thanks for listening to this part of the episode. Like Marissa said earlier, we're going to have an interview here in a minute, so we're going to take a brief detour, and when we come back, we're going to be on the horn with none other than Megan.
Yeah.
Megan's in Mexico. She lives in Mexico right now, and she's going to be giving us some insight about her travel experience, living abroad, and many other things, travel and fitness.
We're excited. Stay tuned.
Thanks, guys. And then we can start talking, because I'll go back in. Okay. Meg, welcome to the show.
Hello.
Hi. Yeah. Have you ever been interviewed in this setting before?
No, not in this setting. Not at all.
It's kind of exciting.
Yeah, it is exciting. So where are you at right now? In the world.
In the world, I'm in. I was gonna say I'm in my dining room, but
yeah.
I'm in Zapopan, Mexico, which is a suburb of Guadalajara. Well, it's basically the same city. It blends together.
Sweet. And so where is that in relation to, we get a lot of questions like, so where does Meg live? Where is that? How would you describe that in relation to Mexico City?
So it's about, since I'm from the Midwest, I'm going to measure everything in terms of driving hours, but it's about 8 hours north of Mexico City. So it's located very much in the center of Mexico, more towards the west coast. We're about 3.5 hours from Puerto Vallarta if you take the new highway.
Yeah. Awesome. Oh, new highway.
Well, it's newish.
Gotcha.
Yeah. It just makes the trip faster.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, so we visited you a couple times where you live now, and once in Mexico City, but you've also lived other places in Mexico?
Yeah, I used to live in Aguascalientes, which is about 3.5 hours east of, about 3 hours east of Guadalajara. And I lived there for about 5 years, and now I'm starting my 6th year in Guadalajara.
Awesome. So is that 11 years total or 12?
Yeah, I just like celebrated 11 years in Mexico.
That's awesome.
I forget important English words, so forgive my pauses.
How many years did it take to convince our parents to come down and see you?
Gosh, like it took moving to Guadalajara, so I would say 5 years almost.
Okay, and then because I remember on the skepticism on the front end, what is their, because they were just down there visiting you like a week ago, so what is their experience now?
So they come down about once a year. They stay anywhere from a few days to a week at a time. When they stay longer, we get to do more. If it's just a short trip, we do 1 or 2 things in the city. It's a big city. And yeah, I mean, they've been able to travel outside of Guadalajara. They've been to San Miguel de Allende, which is where Carmen is from.
Yeah, really beautiful.
Same.
Yeah, now they can't stop. They love talking about it. I think once a year is not enough. They want to come more often.
It's like once you do it, you're like addicted.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, I'm good now.
Yeah. So before we go too much further, and it's an interesting dynamic because you are my sister, and we both know all these things about you. But could you give our audience a little bit about your background? And you can go as far, so as it relates to travel, go as far back as you want, maybe some early influences you had, or whatever excited you about, starting your travel. We always get excited.
Yeah. So I'm just, it's dawning on me that by next summer, I will have been traveling for literally half of my life.
Your life, holy cow.
There you go.
That's true.
That's awesome.
Isn't that awesome?
I know, not to date myself, but so I started traveling outside of the United States when I was 18. I studied for my first year of college in London, England. And I basically haven't stopped. And although I love where we're from, I really enjoy living outside of the US. It's being a perpetual foreigner has its benefits.
That rebellious spirit inside of you.
Exactly. So yeah, so as I mentioned, I studied in London for a year. Then I transferred back to the United States. And after that, I did 2 study abroads, one in Uppsala, Sweden, which is near Stockholm. And then I also did a summer study program in Lima, Peru.
Yep.
So
when you were in London, that was Richmond International College.
Right.
And then was it a specific school in Sweden and Peru, or was it just trips with parents?
Yeah, no, there were specific schools. So in Uppsala, it was Uppsala University.
Mm-hmm.
And then in Peru, it was Universidad del Pacífico, so Pacific University.
Yeah.
So I had to think about it for a moment, but yes.
And I used to make this error a lot, so forgive me if I'm still in error, but Peru's Central America.
South America.
Is it? But it's the north part of South America.
It's the north. Well, it's on the west coast of South America, below Ecuador and above Chile.
And so you did do some travel in Central America too, though, right?
Well, I mainly traveled around Peru and around Mexico. But unfortunately, I would really like to travel down into Guatemala and other Central American countries, but I haven't yet had the opportunity. So I'm hoping, I'm planning on spending Thanksgiving in Chiapas with a friend, and that's one of the southernmost states in Mexico. Mm-hmm. And maybe from there we can cross over into Guatemala for a day.
That'll be cool.
That'd be fun.
Yeah.
Okay, and so what else? So you did the studies abroad, and
Mm-hmm.
Somehow you ended up in Mexico.
Yeah. So my current partner is Mexican, so that's kind of why I chose to stay here. And part of my time in Europe was also due to a foreign boyfriend at the time. So having a foreign partner helps travel.
Yeah. Good deal. So, but you've stuck in Mexico. So,
yeah.
Is there any part of you that wanted to go back to other places you've visited, or was it mainly the family stuff that kept you in Mexico, or was there like a Mexico connection that you had that kept you there?
I really do love Mexico. It's a comfortable place to live. As an American, and just for my personality in general, I do like it. The weather's predictable, although I do miss the cold. But yeah, there are times when I miss particularly Scandinavia.
Okay.
I really loved living in Sweden, and I kind of hold Scandinavian countries up as an ideal.
Any particular reasons?
What's that?
Any particular reasons?
I like how the countries are structured in terms of government and social welfare, but also I just like the people, and I like the weather. I know that's not for everyone, but
well, you kind of have the the best of most people's like ideal weather over the course of the year. You get like really nice warm weather, year round, and then you come for like 2 weeks at Christmas time and just get a little bit of snow, but then you leave it here.
And you get to go back.
Yeah,
exactly. So yeah, in my current living situation, like I see people complaining on Facebook about winter, and I'm like, oh, but I just can't wait to go home. And so, but I'm, like you said, I'm only there for like 2 weeks or a week, and then I come back to 80-degree weather, and all is good.
That's right. And so, so your current profession, you work with students?
Yeah, so I'm a teacher. I teach English, well, specifically language arts and literature. So I'm not an ESL teacher. I teach at a bilingual school, so my students are completely bilingual in English and Spanish. And I also help with my school's exchange program.
Awesome. And so you do a couple travel, like, is it every year that you travel? And because you came back to the US with a group of students at one point.
Yeah, I do either one domestic trip a year or one international trip, depending on what they need. And that's just more of my role as the teacher that helps organize trips. Mm-hmm. I really like sharing the love of travel with my students. So I've been able to go on a couple trips, not with this specific school I'm at now, but I've chaperoned a couple trips to New York City. And I chaperoned a trip to Chicago. And I've now chaperoned trips to Mexico City as well. I'm probably forgetting something, but.
Sure. That's fun. So we do have a couple questions for you past that. I appreciate you sharing a little bit about your background for the audience. Of all of the travel that you've done thus far, or maybe it's a place that you haven't been yet, I'm going to ask you a slightly different question here in a minute, but as far as the actual experience, so a place that you've been and experienced, or an experience that you're planning and envision to have, what's the one that you love the most or you're most eager about, like a place or an event?
So I think that there are two trips really that stand out as my favorites. One was my study trip to Peru. Not only being there and studying something I was very interested in and passionate about, but also being able to travel inside the country. We hiked the Inca Trail, well, part of it. You have a couple options when you go to hike the Inca Trail. You can take a trail that takes, I think, 4 days to a week to hike, which is like the whole trail, or you can just hike one that takes a day. So we did the day-long trip, and that was just amazing. I think if someone has the ability to do that, they definitely should. And then the other one was a road trip I took when on one of my last visits to Europe. We drove from central Sweden down to the tip of Sweden, and we, in my friend's dad's Volvo, which, in Sweden, almost everyone drives a Volvo or a Saab, and it's like a running national joke.
Yeah.
But, we took it to the ferry to Rostock, Germany, and from there we drove down to Berlin, Prague, Vienna, Bratislava, and Krakow in Poland. And after our time in Krakow, we even visited Auschwitz, which is like not something like that's fun, but it's definitely a place that's worth for the historical significance.
That's awesome.
So, yeah.
What was it like crossing over borders? The way I understand it, Europe's pretty easy to cross over borders.
Yeah, so Europe's pretty easy. Any country that's inside of the European Union, and not just within the European Union, but countries that are within the Schengen visa treaty area. So that's something you need to be aware of when you travel to Europe. One thing is the European Union, and one thing is Schengen. No, and so that will determine whether or not you have to present your passport at a border. like obviously your first point of entry into Europe, you're going to have to present your passport.
Mm-hmm.
But after that, like you may or may not have to,
Okay.
but you need to know.
And is it usually just a matter of like just showing your passport as if you'd show your ID at any other place?
Yeah, it's super easy. Like most of my, well, aside from your point of entry into the country, I've also entered into countries by land and technically by sea on a ferry. And in both places, it's very easy. It's just like, here's my passport. Yes, you have a right to be here and you're good to go.
Yeah, that's cool.
So another question that we were going to ask you is, what are your top 3 destination recommendations of all the places?
So yeah, my top 3. So I'm going to be biased and I'm going to say Mexico.
Yeah.
One of the top 3.
In Mexico?
So I would really recommend, like, I think a lot of people limit themselves to the beaches, and the beaches are beautiful and they're worth visiting. And it's definitely an easy introduction into a foreign country. But don't be afraid to go to cities inside the country that you might not be familiar with. Mexico City is super cool. It's not for people who like crowds, for sure. But if you like big cities, it's a cool place to be. There are tons of museums. The culture is cool. It's hip. There are lots of great bars and restaurants. Other cool towns, if you like smaller places, would be San Miguel de Allende, Guanajuato, and Zacatecas. And those are all colonial, beautiful towns in the middle of the country.
We had a really fun time. So Mexico City was one of our 24-hour trips. And man, we packed so much into that trip. I felt like we saw some really awesome monuments. We saw a bunch of city life. Yeah, so the ruins, the Palace of the Arts, all of the different things outside in the city streets. We had a couple really great meals. We saw the CBD, the Central Business District. And then after you guys departed the following morning, we went to this really amazing like garden.
Chapultepec? You went to Chapultepec, right, or no?
Yeah. And there was a zoo that was opening as we got there. We didn't go into the zoo, but it was, this big, vibrant area with a ton of vegetation that you never would have thought was in the middle of the city.
Mexico City.
On the water. So yeah, it was really cool.
It's fun.
So
Mexico is one. Number 2 would be Peru. And it's been a long time since I've been there, and from what I hear from my friends, it's really undergone a transformation since I've been there, so it's even more comfortable to travel there.
Okay.
Like Lima's definitely worth a visit, but you can go to other places like I said, hike the Inca Trail, or go to the Nazca Lines, which I never got a chance to go to. Arequipa is supposed to be interesting, although I think security can be iffy. And my 3rd destination would be Scandinavia. So Scandinavia is definitely a place that's harder to do on a budget just because everything is really expensive.
What's like a ballpark how much more expensive than traveling in the US?
So I would definitely compare. It depends on what you want to do while you're there, right? So you're not going outside of the big cities. You're not going to find hostels and hotels as easily as you might in more touristy, in general, countries. But you can probably find Airbnbs that are great.
We love Airbnb.
We love Airbnb. We stay a lot.
So, but if you're in a partying mood in particular, alcohol is like heavily controlled. So you're going to pay probably twice what you would in the US. And the same goes for eating out in a restaurant. Sweden is a little bit more affordable. Norway is very expensive. I think when we were in Oslo, I don't even remember how much we paid for falafel, and that was like, you know, a long time ago, and it was still like pushing $10. It was expensive. So definitely, but I highly recommend it because not only are there beautiful cities in Scandinavia, if you're a nature lover and you want to go out and hike and enjoy a lake or something like that, Scandinavia has really beautiful nature and it's well taken care of.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for that, Meg. We have just a couple more questions for you, but one more question on the like the traveling, especially abroad note. So some of our listeners, they are just like national travelers, so it's like road trips and things like that. But we really love the idea of inspiring people to get out of their shell and jump on a plane and go outside the country. What's like the biggest obstacle or challenge that you had to overcome when you started traveling, or even living abroad, which is a separate question I'd like to ask you here in a minute.
Yeah.
Just traveling, just going to a place and coming home. What was one of the biggest obstacles you had to overcome in order to?
So, you know, when we grow up, wherever we grow up, we perceive that as being normal, right? So that involves our language, that involves the side of the road we drive on, that involves our facial expressions and our hand gestures and everything. And we don't really consider everything. What's that?
What's available, like, you know, in terms of
we don't really consider like all of the things that we take for granted as being normal. No, so when you go to another country, there's a different normal. And so many things will be the same, right? And especially we live in a very globalized world. So lots of things are the same, but there are these subtle things that are very different still. And they're not always apparent. So there's the obvious thing of language. When you travel in a place like Europe, yes, it's true that most people speak English as a second language or as a first language. But you can't take that for granted. And also, it's nice to know a foreign language because it's always nice to communicate with someone in their own language or have a second language to communicate with someone, right? So just that process of learning a language. And
quick tangent. At one point, what's the most languages you've spoken at one time?
At one time, gosh, I don't even remember. I currently would only feel comfortable speaking in English or Spanish. But once upon a time, I would have felt comfortable speaking in French or Swedish as well. And those languages kind of like lend their way to someone speaking to you. I can understand, like now, even just with Spanish, I can understand basic Portuguese. Even some basic Italian, enough to understand what's going on, right? So that's the nice thing about languages.
Yeah. Okay, so getting used to the different normal.
Yeah, getting used to the different normal. And like I said, so let me give you an example of like a body gesture. So in Mexico, when you're offering something to someone, they'll make this gesture, right? They'll just go. And so for me, that seemed like a little bit like rude, right? And obviously, like for the person making the gesture, they thought it was completely polite. And those little things that you might be offended by, or someone else might be offended by something you say or do, and it's not your intention. So you just sort of have to be an observer of culture and definitely do as much research as you can before you travel to another country so you can prepare yourself for those differences.
Looks like you have
I have a guest.
Yeah.
Hello.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's always really, I like that you mentioned that you think it's important to learn the language before going, because I found that a lot in Europe, that even if your language was broken, if you tried a little, they appreciated that more than if you just spoke to them in English. They were like, hey, thank you for appreciating my country enough to take the time to learn some words, which I think means a lot more than showing up and being like, hey, I'm visiting your country and I don't really care that much about your culture.
exactly. And I think if you're not someone who's quick to learn languages, like that's understandable. It is more difficult for some people than it is for other people. But you can do other things like read a book by an important author from that country, or watch movies. Like really, before you go, immerse yourself in the culture as much as you can, so that when you're talking with someone, even if you have to speak with them in English, you can say like, well, you know, I watched this movie by this director that's really important in your country and I liked it. Or this place is important in your history because, and those things help you overcome the barrier of language, which it takes more time to overcome.
I looked up on our bookshelf. I still have a stack of magazines and newspapers that you gave me in Spanish. I still have a lot of work to do, but I still have them.
Yeah. Decent Spanish. It's coming around.
Anytime there's a Spanish-speaking, person, anyone that I interact with, I try to do the basic pleasantries, like, hey, how are you? Just I think out of probably selfishly out of practice, but I feel like it's respectful to speak in what I assume to be their native language, or try to be nice.
Yeah. So because our platform is very centered around health and wellness and fitness and things like that, another question that we just kind of wanted to talk about is, how do you stay healthy and well, or what are priorities for your wellness while you're traveling?
How many push-ups can you do?
Yeah. So in terms of fitness, like, I'm not only a teacher, but I'm a mother of a toddler. So my fitness involves like being on my feet all day and then chasing my toddler around. But in terms of health, like, I'm really conscious about the food that I eat. I really love the writer Michael Pollan, and he writes a lot about how our food habits have changed over time, and what we need to do to eat better. And one of his maxims is eat food, mostly plants, right? Which I try to live by that. But in a place like Mexico, that's very easy because so much food is grown here and it's inexpensive. So when you're traveling though, what I would recommend is to look for a place where you have a kitchen available, no? So definitely enjoy the local food. That's part of the joy of traveling, but also for the sake of your budget, you can't eat every meal. And also that's like a perfect recipe for having an upset stomach because you're eating in a new place, Yeah. So go to the local store, try some local foods. Here in Mexico, what I would recommend, every neighborhood has a little tiendita, a store. Excuse me. And you can buy rice that's been cooked locally, beans that have been cooked locally, so you don't have to invest the time in cooking those things that are more time consuming. And you could get a piece of chicken, you can get vegetables, fruits, and cook up a nice meal, and make sure you're not just eating processed foods from a convenience store just to fill yourself up, And my second tip would be to walk, right? So Europe is super friendly for pedestrians. You can walk everywhere and walk a lot. And here in Mexico, it's not as pedestrian friendly outside of city centers, but you can still get a lot of walking done if you're willing to put in the effort. And don't be afraid of walking. I think as foreigners, we tend to be afraid of being in a foreign country, especially if we don't understand the language. And I mean, it's good to be cautious, but you don't have to be paranoid either. So.
Yeah. So speaking of, one of the other questions that we were going to ask is there a myth or an idea, preferably maybe a concern that you had prior to traveling, prior to living abroad, that once you were there, you learned the other side of the story? Because I know there are things on both sides. So
yeah. When
we were in New Zealand, times that we visited Mexico, we hear different, both sides, and we get to see the other side, and we're like, it's kind of funny that it's completely opposite or completely different.
Yeah. So I don't like, I've been here so long and I've been so immersed in the culture that it's hard for me to remember um, some of my preconceived notions of what Mexico was like before I came here. Because for me, just like living here is so natural now. But in general, especially as a single woman traveling, security was always kind of at the back of my mind as a concern everywhere I went, not just Mexico. And it was also a concern for my parents when I was still like under their care.
I still remember the day that we sent you out of Chicago O'Hare Airport, for the first time. It was a very bittersweet day.
Yeah.
I'm sure mom and dad would
not characterize it as that. They were more
they'd have
like
a different way of
bitter than sweet.
Yeah.
Bad. But you came back.
I came back, and I still come back. I come back pretty often.
Very often. They didn't really have video chat back then, did they?
Yeah, no, they didn't. So like imagine for us, social media and video chat have done wonders. But yeah, I think security is always a concern, and I think that it's important to know what the risks are where you're going. The State Department always issues their warnings for U.S. citizens, and I would take that as definitely as a good measure of what the general security situation is like. But that doesn't mean that you as an individual will be at risk, right? Most people in the world are good, honest people, and they're going to be good to you and they're going to help you. Right. So, and if you do have a situation that's unpleasant things can happen anywhere. And you can trust in the good of the people around you to help you through those times, right?
We talked about this a few times. Us traveling, we hear a lot of concerns. There are a few issues that were prime news here in Houston when we were going to Mexico, and then also, when Marissa traveled to Europe after school, there were some issues that were going on in Europe, and we always like to explain, sure that might have happened very close to the destination, the time that we're going to be there, but the chance of that happening to us is so slim. It could happen anywhere, but that is not going to cause us to be concerned that it's going to happen to us. We're always going to be aware, and we're going to take proper precautions. And, if something does happen, we would accept that. But at the same time, the news has a goal. The news channels have a goal. Yeah. And we're not going to allow that goal to how we view travel.
Letting the fear prevent you from doing things like traveling, and that's not okay.
Yeah, it's like I would never want to tell someone like, oh, go to Mexico, it's perfect, there are no problems, because that's not true. And the minute you tell someone that they're going to experience something horrible and not be prepared for that possibility, right? But at the same time, like you said, the possibility of it happening to you as an individual is very unlikely. And you shouldn't let that fear prevent you from having really wonderful experiences and getting to know other people and other cultures and just see the world. Like, the world's a really beautiful place, and it's so worth seeing. Like, there's no place in the world that's not really worth seeing, for one reason or another. Like, even places that you might consider ugly have something to teach you, so.
Yeah, so I remember the first time we visited you in Guadalajara, walking around, and I was, just experiencing, the new normal, and I was just looking around, and I think I was expecting something different, but I remember asking you the question. I just said, Meg, I'm having difficulty finding the beauty in what's around me. Like, why? Can you talk to me about why this looks this way, or why are these things laid out this way? And then you explained some things to me, like very, very simply, like, for example, I think the area that we were in might have looked a little bit run down. And I asked, well, why does it kind of look run down? Isn't this like a busy area? And you're like, well, the different use of materials, the climate, earthquakes, different things. But the magic in this area is not really how it looks. Like, it doesn't matter how it looks. Wait until you have a chance to experience it. And that one restaurant that I mean, if I was driving through Houston and saw this restaurant on a corner, I probably wouldn't have gone, or I wouldn't have known it was there. But, you happen to know it was there, and it was the most amazing meal I had had in a long time.
The service was great.
The service was incredible. They had 4 or 5 people waiting on us hand and foot. And, we tried to rack up a bill, and I thought I was going to be suave, and I said, I'm going to take the bill, and I taken it's like, really inexpensive. I thought, and I feel really macho now that I'm taking this inexpensive bill. So it was a really pleasant experience. It was completely different than what I expected, but everything about it was just, what really, in my opinion, what really matters. It was a great experience. It was a great time, great meal, great service. I felt incredible walking out of there, and really came to love that area. We love going back, coming to visit. So
Yeah.
I think
We like having you.
Yeah, I think another point that that you kind of brought up is, and you as well, is that the beauty of a lot of places is the people and the good people that you run into and meet and get to connect with. I mean, we had that experience in New Zealand. That like a lot of our favorite experiences were just the people that we met and got to talk to and connect with. I mean, you can go to a place and see it and kind of have a feeling, but a lot of the times the feeling is meeting someone and connecting with them.
Yeah, and we plan these trips for people, and we look at these photos, and we're like, man, this would be amazing, this would be amazing. And we just planned a trip for someone to New Zealand, and we were including some photos in the itinerary, and we're like, man, this photo does not even do this justice. Actually being there and experiencing it is completely different. So that being said, we'll kind of close out, Meg, but would you be willing to talk a little bit about living abroad, and maybe add some context to what we've already talked about, but small detailed things like, getting housing, maybe even things you need to consider, like you mentioned before, obtaining a visa and, changing citizenship. And you have a lot of experience in that, not only with your own citizenship, but also you have a wonderful baby.
Yeah.
Baby/teenager in Pia.
Yeah. So I am an American citizen, but I am a permanent resident of Mexico, right? So once you've lived in Mexico, or depending on the circumstances of your stay in Mexico, you can become a permanent resident. That itself opens its way to citizenship, although, as an adult, if you don't have a birthright to another citizenship, especially as an American, like, it's pretty easy for you to get a long-term visa in a country, right? So there's no reason to jeopardize your own citizenship by claiming dual citizenship in another country, okay? And now in the case of my daughter, she was born here in Mexico, but both Mexico and the United States have birthright citizenship. So that means that if you are born on American or Mexican soil, you are that nationality by birth. But also, if you have a parent that is Mexican or American, you can give your nationality to your child, right? So in this case, I gave my nationality to Pia. And that's a whole process like that. It's not necessarily difficult, but there are a lot of details that make the process easier or more difficult. I'm not legally married, so that actually makes it easier as a woman to pass your citizenship on to your child, right? And that's just like government bureaucratic laws. If you're married, it's not that it's difficult by any means, it's just extra paperwork. And that's mainly what it is. If you're the father, you have to provide a paternity test. So that's one side. It's like, but before you go to a country and have a child there, you should pass a few other hurdles first. So the first thing is making sure you have a valid passport. And this isn't just for living in a country. Let's say you want to stay in a country for 2 months, right? It's always important, or even just a week. It's always important to make sure that your passport will be valid for 6 months after the end of your trip, right? So most countries require that it's going to be valid for at least 3 to 6 months. So you're not stranded in that country on an expired passport for any reason. They just don't want to risk it. Another important thing to look into is how long can I stay in this country without a visa? So again, if you're an American citizen, like you have a really great passport. You can go many places without a visa. But that period of time is short, and your purpose for being in a country is also very important. So if you're going to travel, then there should be no problem. If you're going to study, you're going to need a letter from the school that you're going to study at that says that you've been invited to go there, right? So when I went through the visa process in Mexico, it was very different. A few years ago, there were some reforms. When I first went through the visa process, you didn't have to get a visa before you came to Mexico. You could apply for it once you were inside the country. Now you have to apply in advance. So for example, when we have new teachers coming from the US, they have to apply for their visa from the United States with this offer of a job at their local Mexican consulate. And from there, they once they're issued the visa, they can come to the country. And that's going to be what it's like in most places, even for studying, right? So you'll need to go through that process before you.
Working, sorry to interrupt. The visa.
Working or studying.
Working and studying, okay.
Yeah, so for example, when I went to Sweden, since I was going to be there beyond the normal period of studying, I needed a visa. And also in the case of Sweden, I had to prove that I had enough money in my account, or in the case, because I was under my parents' care, my parents' account, to be solvent for my entire trip. Those are little details you need to know before you travel, right? So some countries require that, others don't.
Right.
So the next thing is like, where am I going to stay, right? So one complication, and don't never think that another country, just because it's not the United States, is not going to have rules and regulations and laws, right? Like all countries have them, and you need to be aware of what they are. So renting if you're traveling as a student, most of these things are a lot easier, and you'll have the help of your international office and the hosting international office to help you. But if you're just an individual, you need to know what it's like to rent in that country, because a lot of people might not be willing to rent to you as a foreigner, because there's no way to ensure that you will stay there and pay up for the duration of your contract. So Guadalajara is an excellent example of that. It's actually very difficult to rent inside the city, even for other Mexicans that are not from Guadalajara, because in most places, you need to, when you're going to sign your contract, you have to have someone else as a co-signer who owns property. And specifically in Guadalajara, it's not just that they own property, it's that their property is paid off in full. So there's no, so these are like really specific details that you might not know until you get here. And then it's like, if you don't have those things lined up before you go, it can really make or break your experience in the country. Even something like getting a cell phone contract for a year could be difficult.
Yeah.
Right.
If you don't know what to expect, right? And to avoid those problems, especially if you don't speak the local language well, those things might be difficult to find in like a simple Google search. So what I would do is look for local expat groups on Facebook. I mean, I know that sounds not legit at all, but you would be surprised. There are a lot of normal people. They've been through the experience and they can give you advice. How do I rent? Where do I rent? Where do I find these things?
Awesome.
Things like that, you know.
Yeah. Good deal. Well, is there anything else on your end?
No.
Any other tips or thoughts that came to mind that you weren't able to chat about if one of us interrupted you? Or any other tips?
No, I mean, I think I've said everything I need to say. I mean, just a random tip, like for me as a person who was freshly out of the United States. So if you're in a grocery store, it's really important to know where the foods you might want to eat are. So one thing every country I go to, it seems to be different, is where do I find the eggs in a supermarket? So if you go into a supermarket and as an American, you think they're in the refrigerated section, right? And they are not in the refrigerated section, then you need to go look in some other random location, probably in the produce, because they won't be refrigerated. I know it's a really random tip, but I've spent a lot of my days stressed out trying to find eggs, and you never know. Well, you can Google it now, but you might not know if you're in a country that refrigerates their eggs or doesn't. But
It's a good pro.
They're okay to eat. Don't worry. It's perfectly normal and safe. Both.
Have you ever had shelf stable milk?
No. Or maybe I have. Is that in the Tetra Pak?
We saw that for the first time in New Zealand. We didn't feel a strong urge to try it, but it is definitely a curiosity in our mind.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, like that's the main milk we buy
Right.
here. You can buy it in the plastic jugs too, but and also here you can buy it in a plastic bag.
Really?
And is that environmentally friendly?
Yeah.
There you go.
They had a lot of that in Belize. They would put water in bags, and you would just
Yeah.
a little water sack, and you're like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a Latin American thing, like walking around with your bag of water and a straw stuck in your bag.
Yeah.
It's good.
Awesome, Meg. Well, we really appreciate your time today and being a great sport, answering all of our questions. We have asked you offline if you'd be willing to answer and feed any questions from our talk today indirectly. So if any of our followers do have questions, they can send them to us, and then we'll have Megan answer them, and maybe like another audio episode we'll throw up, or just something we throw up on the website. Otherwise, yeah, thanks again for your time, and hope to come see you soon.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope to see you guys soon. I like having visitors. So.
Yay.